I had aspirations to travel still.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hadn't completely by no means let go of my plans to become a doctor, but I was allowing myself room and time to travel and get more experience. Still while traveling, still seek out kind of internships and opportunities that would lend themselves to becoming to applying to medical school and adding those to my resume. So in my mind, I was postponing things, not indefinitely. But yeah, that led me to traveling abroad back to South America because I fell in love in my first study abroad during college. And so I found a program in Ecuador, and it was called the Cinturandis Foundation. And it was a mobile surgery unit.
Okay. So we are here today. We are SayoStudio, a science communication studio that specializes in visuals to communicate science. I'm Nicole Fuller, and I'm here with Claire Agosti, our art director and creative team lead. And so today we are going to be learning more about Claire, which I'm very excited about. And so to start with, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you are currently doing here at SayoStudio?
Yeah. So currently, I am, as Nicole stated, art director, and my most recent title is creative team lead. I wear many hats or many pants. I don't know, whatever you prefer. I think primarily I do a lot of art direction and just move projects along, starting from the very first contact, so the lead, all the way to project completion. And yeah, also...
Can I interrupt and ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
So with regards to science communication, what does that mean? Where does the project start generally? Like when you're starting from the beginning?
Where does it start?
Yeah. Where does it start? What does the beginning of a project look like for those of our viewers who don't know?
Okay, that's a good question. I would say it starts with someone looking to communicate their scientific story. For us, that can be a very wide range of scientific topics, from sociology to microbiology to physics to many different disciplines of science. But yeah, someone coming to us and wanting to communicate their science in a way that is digestible and visually appealing. And I think that's, well, for me personally, that's why I love what I do so much, is taking complex scientific information and making it, in my own mind, breaking it down to the simplest form that I can, and then translating that into a visual product.
So I guess I'm going to give you a leading question. I guess what I'm wondering is if I'm coming to you as a scientist who needs something done, do I have to have a really formed idea and then you just make it pretty? Or like what kind of information do I need? And then what do you do with it, either with our team or if you're working on it yourself to design it?
That's a really good question. I think it varies. I definitely don't think a scientist needs to have a very solid formed idea. I think it can be, and oftentimes it is, more vague, and there's not even really a visual in mind yet. It's kind of bullet points, and this is what we discovered ultimately, or this is what I think is really cool about the science that I do. So no, it definitely doesn't have to be a completely formed idea. I think another really fun part of the job is helping form that idea, helping achieve that clarity, and asking the right questions about, what are the applications of your science? Who does it affect? What do people absolutely need to know?
That is a great answer. And the reason I ask is because I know that you're so good at helping with that early development. And a lot of times it is, from, the actual manuscript, the journal article, and taking that and really working through it and, talking with the client. And then also, shepherding the other artists and illustrators and helping them, fine tune it based on what the client needs. So,
yeah. And thank you. I think that's really good. That's really nice to hear from you. It's a challenge that I never ever get tired of just simplifying and simplifying and simplifying. And I feel like I could simplify forever, and I love that. And I think it's why I really love the more like flat vector stuff, because in my mind it's such a visual representation of the most simple form of a really complex complex subject.
Really distilling it.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm wondering for everybody, so how are you able to do that? What kind of background do you have? Do you have a strong science background? Did you start out in art versus science? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I got my BA in biology at Lewis and Clark College. I went in wanting to become a doctor. So I pieced together a pre-med program for myself at Lewis and Clark College.
Wait. So they didn't have a pre-med program? Okay. I actually know the answer because I went to Lewis and Clark too. But for those of our viewers, again, who might not know this, so Lewis and Clark is very special in that it's a true liberal arts college.
Yes.
And a little bit smaller. So
Yeah. And so it has a very holistic approach to education, and which I loved. But yeah, it did mean that I had to put that curriculum together for myself. It did mean that I came up against some resistance. My major was biology, and my curriculum didn't really look like a biology major at the end of the day. But I think something that I've always been good at is just following what I'm passionate about, regardless of if it makes sense or not. So while doing pre-med, I was very faithful to continuing my education in art, and Spanish specifically. Language has always been a passion of mine, foreign language, and Spanish was something that I landed on starting in middle school. And yeah, I loved it, and I stuck with it. And even though it was hard piecing all this together and trying to finish my biology major requirements, I managed to stick to all of those things.
Oh, that's a lot. All three. I thought that I did a good job with my two. Art and science.
Yeah, from beginning to end, with a lot of pushback. So, but yeah, I don't regret it at all. And, because it was a liberal arts school, Lewis and Clark did make that possible.
And did you do one of their overseas trips?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I ended up studying abroad in Chile, and really got to use my Spanish language, my education in Spanish language, and really learn it. And yeah, that was the most incredible experience. I fell in love with South America. I feel confident saying I mastered the Spanish language.
So was that just from your semester abroad?
Yeah.
Because you also you also traveled and lived in South America,
Yes.
right? Okay.
After Lewis and Clark. Yeah. So we can jump forward. I graduated from Lewis and Clark. I still had every intention of going to medical school. And I originally went back to Alaska, where I'm from, and I started pursuing opportunities to prepare me for applying to medical school. So that included working as a scribe in the ER at Providence Medical Center at the Providence Hospital in Anchorage, Alaska, which was an absolutely amazing experience. I loved being in the ER and working with a bunch of different ER doctors, and actually being able to, your job as a scribe is to see a patient with an emergency medicine doctor and summarize what the visit was about and get all the key points. And
that seems like it should be obvious, but I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember, you go in and there's a lot of pressure in the training period of it, of like, this is a sharp learning curve. It's really challenging. Like, these doctors are not slowing down for you. They have to go about business as normal. And
I imagine if you make mistakes, there could be big repercussions.
Yeah. You had to stay after and finish out all of, I'm going to forget all the acronyms, but finish out the full, report if you didn't finish it in the visit itself. And they really relied on the scribes to do that for them. And then, so they made it really scary as far as like, this is a sharp learning curve. Like, you're learning a lot of medical terminology, acronyms, and you have to do it fast, and some doctors are more patient than others. But I remember excelling in that environment and getting a lot of encouragement from the doctors I was able to scribe for, and just them pointing out that I was a good writer and was good at summarizing that information quickly. So I got a lot of positive feedback and reassurance from that experience.
So I want to hear more about that early time, but do you think that helps in what we do today at SayoStudio?
100%.
Yeah, I never put that connection together, but I imagine it does.
Yeah. And I still today, that experience is so impactful for me. I still today have, so when you're on the ER computers, it's all like you're completely logged into the hospital system, and because it's all HIPAA compliant, so no information can be taken, and it's all in their internal electronic medical system. And so the only way I could take notes was now I'm curious how I had this open, but for some reason I have notes saved on like email drafts, and it's all acronyms and medical phrases and just vocabulary, really, that's commonly used in an emergency room. And I still save those on my personal Gmail because I learned so much, and it
I didn't know that. That's interesting. And I think it's interesting thinking about that learning of language, your Spanish knowledge and learning of language, and then really, learning the language that the different disciplines of scientists that we work with use, and being able to communicate them so that we can communicate their ideas.
Yeah. There is kind of a connection there all the way through.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It is interesting.
That's really interesting.
So at what point did you decide that you weren't going to continue pursuing the medical
That's
degree?
A really good question. So while I was working as a scribe, I was studying for the MCAT. And I took it one time and didn't do nearly as well as I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little bit below kind of even the average, and I had big aspirations for the schools I wanted to go to, and I knew also that like it's a hard test and you can take it many times. So I took it once, and then I guess in my mind, I had aspirations to travel still.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hadn't completely by no means let go of my plans to become a doctor, but I was allowing myself room and time to travel and get more experience. Still while traveling, still seek out kind of internships and opportunities that would lend themselves to becoming to applying to medical school and adding those to my resume. So in my mind, I was postponing things, not indefinitely. But yeah, that led me to traveling abroad back to South America because I fell in love in my first study abroad during college. And so I found a program in Ecuador, and it was called the Cinturandis Foundation. And it was a mobile surgery unit.
Okay.
Yeah, and they looked for pre-med students or medical students who wanted the opportunity to be a part of this program that made surgery accessible to really remote populations in Ecuador that didn't have good access to medical care, much less surgery.
Sounds both amazing and hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what was an excuse for me to go back to South America. And then, so I did that program and then combined it with a trip that led me through Peru, through Ecuador, south through Peru, and ultimately back to Chile to visit friends. Yeah. And yeah, on that trip, I ended up meeting someone in Peru who later became my significant other, and ultimately led me to moving down to Peru. Yeah.
So that's kind of the point when we reconnected, right? So we, when you were in college, I'm trying to remember, was it your senior year? Or we had talked a little bit and we had worked together some to explore science illustration a little bit.
Yes.
And so then you went through all these different experiences and we reconnected. Yeah. And so can you tell us a little bit about what point you were at when we reconnected and what skills you were interested in working on? What were you doing at that time?
Yeah. So we actually originally met, I think it was 2014. I was a junior. And you had come to Lewis and Clark to do a seminar. You were invited back. And I was immediately inspired by science illustration because it combined two of my passions. And yeah, I was totally enthralled by what you talked about and what you showed. And I approached you for an internship. And I got, I think they called it the Miller Award. So it was a all paid internship for me to do with you over the summer. But yeah, so that's when we initially met, and I still had every intention of going to medical school. And I remember
I worked really hard not to push you.
Yeah.
I'm like, you do what you do.
But
I'm going to support you.
You had many questions, like, why? Like, are you sure?
No, I didn't.
No, you were but I remember asking you.
Yeah,
because
I went through a similar journey.
Yeah, you went through a very similar journey. Yeah. So it was more me prompting you, like, well, what changed your mind? So yeah, so that was how we initially met. And then, fast forward, I'm traveling through South America after having graduated, and having that experience as a scribe. And I ended up going back to Peru. At that point, I still planned to study for the MCAT, and just postpone it and take my time. And so I moved to Peru, and for a time, I dedicated most of my time to running a rafting business, with my partner at the time.
You've done so much.
Yeah. And then in the back of my mind, I knew I was kind of putting off what was for me, where I was going to land. I ended up traveling back to the States and taking the MCAT one more time. And again, not doing as well as I wanted.
It's got to be hard after taking a break like that and coming back. And
I moved with all my books. I studied. I had all the things. But I wasn't entirely realistic. So it was hard. It was hard. And the MCAT's hard. Test taking is hard. It's never something that's come very naturally to me. So I, again, didn't do as well as I wanted. And at that point, I was really questioning. I was like, I love my life in South America. I love the freedoms I have. Travel is something that's really important to me. So at that point, I think that's when I really, I was okay with medical school not being the ultimate, the ultimate place for me to land. So I remember at that point, I was following a group called Freelancing Females.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
They're on Facebook. And it was one girl, young woman, probably close to my age, who started it. And at that time, kind of working and traveling was generally like it was popular. There was people who were doing that. And so I consider myself a freelancer, I guess. Or wanted to be able to have that life. Because I knew I was in Peru, and I knew I could do things remotely or try to do things remotely. So that's when I started getting into web design. And I felt like I had enough artistic background, and there's still like a technical side to it that I liked. Coding was something that called my attention and felt like a fun challenge. So I went through a web design course that I found that was also female founded, and she marketed herself that way. Like, it's, web development is kind of this scary word that's like kind of like, what's the word? Safeguarded or
I can't think of the word for that either.
What's the word? I don't know. But kind of is meant to scare people away. And so I really liked that message, and I was like, I can learn coding. So I delved into that program, and I just learned the basics, like HTML and CSS and a little bit of PHP as it pertained to WordPress, which made sense to me. It's the most popular platform for websites. So I did that, and then I reached back out to you. And I offered to build your website.
And it was perfect timing. Yeah. It really felt fortuitous. Like,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember I was so nervous.
I was so happy to hear from you. It had been a long time.
Yeah. So, it had been a long time. But I was nervous. I was like, how is she going to receive this? I'm
like, yes, design my website. I'm sick of trying to do that stuff on my own.
Well, and I was really hopeful. Like, I really wanted to work with you, but then I had just embarked on like charging people for what I was doing. And so I was really thinking about how it was going to support me and how I could make a business out of it. And so that was nerve-wracking too. You know, I had to think of a price and what I thought I was worth, my skills were worth. So that was probably the most nerve-wracking part about it. But yeah, you received me.
And I ran a really hard bargain. I'm like, no.
No.
I'm like, no, makes sense.
You were so
I
fair.
trust that you know what you're doing.
Yeah. 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 So that's how we reconnected, through web design.
Yeah, and I think even at that point, you weren't just designing my website. Like, you really helped me think through my messaging. And like you said on our earlier session that we had, you know, we've time and time again, we've tried to rethink what services our clients really need, if there's better ways to package it that make more sense. And I think that began as we started working on the website as kind of the front of the business, the front door.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and at that time, I'm like, okay, Claire is doing web design. I'm not going to pressure her to do other stuff. You know, she's not doing illustration right now. That's okay.
Yeah.
So how did you get from that point to where we are? I guess that's what I want to know. But I also think that I neglected to ask you about your art background. I think you told us a little bit about your biology and your med school background, but you do have quite a long history of
art.
Yeah, working on your art skills.
Yeah.
And developing your talent.
Yeah, I think I just mentioned that I kept it up through college. And so for me, like you, it looked like drawing. Drawing was and has been since I was very young. Something I'm drawn to and just have a little bit of a knack for. And so yeah, drawing. I stuck faithfully to Professor Beers and all of her series of drawing courses. And I progressed through them from A to Z. And yeah, I, within that learned some, charcoal to pencil drawing, some ink drawing. I think I taught myself color theory. I remember Professor Beers asking me one time, like, have you taken like the color theory course or the painting course? And I was like, no. And I remember her being like, oh. So yeah, that's what I guess in a formally, that was the entirety of my art education. Yeah.
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 And so we reconnected. You helped me redesign the website. And now today you're art director and creative lead.
Yes.
So I guess, I could speak to a lot of your growth, but how do you see that journey, and are you excited about where you're at now? And I don't know, are there other things you want to speak to with regards to that?
Yeah. So that was 5 from then to now. That was around a little less than 5 years ago. It's funny that you said, like, I came on as, a web designer and developer, and you were like, okay, I'm not going to push her to do anything else. But in the back of my head, I was like, oh, what one day she'll let me do science illustrations. So, I very early on, I knew that was my ultimate goal.
Okay, that's so. I did not know that.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, it just married all the things I love, and your work, I think, it ultimately felt so out of reach. I hadn't had a formal education in science illustration like you had. I didn't have any formal experience with digital art. So yeah, I think it was intimidating. And I guess I just let myself go through the paces and slowly find confidence as I got more experiences and slowly took on projects that came through SayoStudio.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it felt like an intimidating goal.
It's interesting because I think that, you know, as you grew into this role now, I was growing into being a business owner and leading and allowing other people to do more work. And so we kind of grew together in that regard. So it sounds really silly, but I'm really proud of myself for getting to a point where I can let go and be so proud of what others are doing. And I'm so appreciative that you were so instrumental in getting me there. So yeah, I mean, it's really, there are definitely times at the beginning where like, I just didn't even think to have you doing stuff. And, you know, now we have, you know, 10 different illustrators, designers, animators working on things. And I think, you know, that largely started with you opening the door and allowing me to see what was possible. So thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. So, so you're happy, you enjoy doing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a leading question.
Yes.
But
I absolutely adore it. I think, you know, after slowly, you know, I started with web design and development, and then, as you stated, very early on, that involved a little bit more of kind of, business development, but like lightly. Just, you know, I had my own freelancer experience, and so
which helps a
yeah.
lot.
So from the beginning, we could kind of have those conversations, and what does it look like to package your services, and so yeah. So it started shifting from web design very early on in that sense, and then yeah, slowly picking up initially kind of design things, and then some more abstract science illustration things, and then just slowly, you know, somersaulted from there. But I think the most recent development of really jumping into business development in the true sense of the word has been a challenge that I didn't know I wanted or could do justice to. And so, yeah, I guess that, you know, evolving into that role has been one of the most exciting things recently.
So can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that? Like,
yeah. So just really thinking big picture. I think for a long time, I told myself I wasn't good at business. And I more recently decisively left that behind, because it was just holding me back. And even thinking about it now, I started thinking about it from a business perspective. And I plan to embark on that independently and find the resources I needed. So yeah, leaving that kind of limiting belief behind and just...
I definitely get that. It's something that I've been working on too. So.
Yeah. And so business development, jumping into, you know, big picture. Who are we trying to reach? How can we refine our message? How can we refine our services? What's our impact? And then the more the more technical and difficult parts of that. How do we price these services and these ideas, and what's the value of what we offer? And then, rethinking packaging and rethinking how we present science communication, and rethinking how we can even coach clients and customers to achieve their goals in communicating their science. So that is, I think, a most recent development in my role that has been really, really exciting, and something I enjoy more than I ever could have imagined.
I'm very excited you enjoy it too. No, yeah, I think it's great both for you to be doing that and see the growth in the ideas that you have, and us to be able to bounce those ideas and really bring the rest of the team in on that too, and grow together. So I feel like we've been talking a while, but I have 2 more questions.
Okay.
So what has been the biggest, or what is the biggest challenge? Is there something that you don't like, that you find frustrating, or that is just difficult but you're working through?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of difficult things. The most difficult, or what stands out in my mind, I guess, is the challenge of balancing my leadership role with my desire for skill, like artistic skill development. Yeah. I think that's probably one of the most challenging things. I mean, back to what I was saying originally about my insecurities. I don't have a formal education in science illustration, and
which is one thing that I think is kind of amazing about our field, is that it's definitely a space for you to take skills from so many different places and weave them together without an education in that realm. I mean, not to say that I don't completely value my graduate illustration program, but there's so many people that are showing how successful you can be coming from different areas. So I mean, and I think a lot of it is about self-growth, and you are such a great example of just going out and figuring it out. Like, I need these skills. I want these skills. I want to understand how to do this. So I'm going to teach myself.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that I don't necessarily love about the tech world that we're in, but it's so incredible that you can look up anything. I mean, you can learn anything by,
and that's, being self-taught is you're also self-taught in many ways, and that's given me a lot of confidence. And we've had this conversation before, and I know we've talked through these insecurities before, and you've given me that confidence that you can be self-taught. And so many people in this field are self-taught. So many people start off as scientists with PhDs, and then they jump into this as self-taught animators and illustrators. And so I guess just, that, good or bad, just is a constant drive for me to always be improving and learning and putting time into whatever program it is that is allowing me to create illustrations and graphics, and so that's challenging. It's challenging to balance it. I love my role as a leader and as a director, and I at the same time, I infinitely want to have skills that keep me relevant in our industry.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. So that's the biggest challenge.
And similar to what you just said, I feel like it's been a learning experience for me to figure out how to take Like, I think both you and I share that drive to figure stuff out on our own.
Yes.
And a lot of the people we work with also, I think, are great and want to continue learning.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I think we're able to help people figure out how to learn some of these programs and which ones might be more helpful. But it's not always easy figuring out how best to do that and get people there. So that's been interesting. But
yeah, really interesting.
And trying to decide, okay, is it something that somebody really wants to learn, but they're intimidated?
Yeah.
And can I help get them past that? Or is it just something they're not interested in, so I'm not going to push?
Yeah.
And so
yeah. No, that's been a really interesting challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And the diversity that's out there as far as what program softwares people do use, and what's the best combination, and what's the most efficient, melding of all these softwares and programs that gets you to, a polished, beautiful illustration or animation. And this makes me think of the question we ask all the time, I think you always say, what's the phrase you always say?
Like, what do I say? I don't know.
For
other than one more thing. I say that a lot.
No, for as long as you're not cheating. For like,
yeah. What do I say?
What do you say?
I don't know.
Oh, this is gonna bother me.
Yeah, we'll have to come back to it on a future episode when we think of it.
About essentially using design softwares and programs to as efficiently as you possibly can. You know?
I think something along the lines of, as long as you're not stealing from other people, you're not plagiarizing.
Yeah.
Then doing something faster is not cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that I'm going to have to embrace, which is going to be really hard for me. And as a future episode talking about AI and how we're thinking about integrating those tools and really trying to change the mindset that they are tools that are going to be
and we're not cheating. Yeah.
So that'll be interesting.
It will be.
Okay. So to kind of wrap things up.
Okay.
Do you have any inspirations, mentors that you feel like helped get you here on your very interesting journey to where you're at now?
Yeah, I think ultimately I would say two who immediately stand out in my mind. Chronologically. The first is my art professor at Lewis and Clark College, Deborah Beers. She is just an incredible professor. Really pushed you to really think about what you were looking at and why and how you can look at it different. And she had a love for natural science, plants and animals, and just an incredible teacher. And ultimately she pushed me and she believed in me, and
That's
so
amazing.
Deborah Beers. And then you. You, from that internship until now, you have always been my biggest.
You're gonna make me cry.
No, you've been my biggest inspiration. How you approach business, how honestly you approach it, how what's the word I'm looking for? It's gonna come to me. Honestly and vulnerably you approach business, which I don't think. It's not something I ever associated with business. So, that combined with just, I mean, how incredibly talented you are as an artist.
Thank you. That's really, that's
yeah.
amazing, especially coming from you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I wouldn't be, I mean, obviously we work together,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't have my dream job if it weren't for you.
Aw.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's really incredible.
I'm lucky.
I am so grateful for those words. And I'm also grateful. Yeah, I mean, you give me confidence. I mean, I think we've talked about imposter syndrome sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're one of the big reasons that I've been able to continue forward and feel good about things. And yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think we balance.
Yeah.
We balance each other out in a big way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We think about things in a lot of similar ways, but also in different ways. I think it's great. We can build off of each other. And I'm really excited to see where we take this now. I'm a little teary.
I am too. Yeah, I think we're both confident in different areas.
Yeah. And
ultimately our confidence in those areas carries each other.
Mm-hmm.
Just like really naturally.
Yeah.
So yeah. It feels seamless. It doesn't feel forced. I think we often both are a voice of reason for each other.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Which is needed.
Yeah.
Because it's challenging.
And so this is wonderful. And I also want to give a shout out to the rest of our team.
Yes.
And I think that I feel like this camaraderie we've been able to build with the rest of our group. And I'm so grateful. And to really find people that love doing some of the things that we might not be as good at, whether or not it's business or marketing SayoStudio, and bringing more of those expertise in-house as well, beyond just the illustration and design, but putting it in the whole picture.
Yeah.
And our great artists and illustrators and designers. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up. I think how we push each other and how we work together has ultimately created, I hope, the work mentality, work environment that we have today, as far as always improving and optimizing and rehashing out and
being a little vulnerable.
Yeah, being a little vulnerable. Yeah. And we've found people who resonate with that, who are at the very are receptive to it.
Yeah.
And we're all challenged every day.
And I think a lot of the people, the end clients we work with also resonate with that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'd agree. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for telling us about your incredible journey, Claire. Thank you all for listening and tuning in. We would love to hear about what you got out of this, what you're interested in, what resonates, and what you'd like to hear more of. So comment, you can reach out to us. We have more information in the description, and also links back to our previous episode where I talk a little bit about what I went through and how I got where I am, and about SayoStudio more generally. So thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.